My name is Claire Bennett, and I was 40 years old when I learned that sometimes the most dangerous sentence in a marriage isn't a confession, it's a question. My husband, Daniel, looked at me across our kitchen table one rainy Thursday night and asked, "Claire, how long is your mother planning to stay?" It sounded like an ordinary question. At the time, I didn't realize it was the beginning of the end of the life I thought I knew. My mother, Evelyn, was 74 years old. She had always been independent, stubborn, and proud. She lived alone in a small house outside Columbus, Ohio, and for most of her life, she had refused help from anyone. But that night, she had nowhere else to go. A pipe had burst in her basement. Water had damaged the furnace, part of the electrical system, and half of the flooring. The contractor told her it would take at least 2 weeks before the house was safe enough for her to return. So I drove 3 hours through heavy rain, picked her up, packed 2 suitcases into my car, and brought her to our house. I thought my husband would understand. After all, we'd been married for 12 years. He knew my mother. He knew how important she was to me, and more importantly, he knew she had never asked us for anything. She had never moved in with us before. She had never asked us for money. She had never complained about our marriage. She had never interfered in our lives. She simply needed a place to sleep, for a few nights. That was all. But Daniel didn't look at my mother when he asked his question. He looked at me. "How long?" he repeated. 2 weeks, I said. "Maybe less." He leaned back in his chair. 2 weeks? I nodded. "Daniel, the repairs should be finished by then." He sighed. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I don't think this house can become your mother's temporary home." I stared at him. My mother was sitting in the living room. She could hear every word. And that was when I noticed something strange. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She was just looking down at her hands, as if she had already expected this. And suddenly I had a question of my own. What did my mother know that I didn't? My mother had raised me alone for most of my childhood. My father left when I was 9. He didn't die. He didn't disappear. He simply decided he wanted a different life. He moved to Florida with another woman and eventually stopped calling. My mother never spoke badly about him. Whenever I asked where he was, she'd simply say, "Some people don't know how to appreciate what they have." Then she'd change the subject. She worked 2 jobs for several years. During the day, she worked at a medical billing office. At night, she cleaned a small dental clinic. I remember waking up sometimes and seeing her sitting at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, counting bills. She always smiled when she noticed me. "Go back to bed, sweetheart." "Are we okay?" "We're more than okay." She always said that, even when we weren't. She paid for my school supplies. She saved for my college. She helped me buy my first used car. And when I met Daniel, she was the first person who told me, "Watch how a man treats you when nobody is watching." I laughed at the time. I thought she was being overly protective. But 12 years later, sitting across from my husband while my 74-year-old mother listened from another room, I remembered those words. Watch how a man treats you when nobody is watching. Daniel had always been charming around other people. He was polite to my mother. He brought her flowers on Mother's Day. He called her Mom, even though she never asked him to. Our friends thought he adored her, but maybe my mother had seen something I hadn't. That night, Daniel waited until my mother went upstairs before continuing the conversation. "Claire, I'm not trying to be cruel." Whenever someone starts a sentence that way, they're usually about to say something cruel. "I just think we need boundaries." She's my mother. I know. She has nowhere else to go. She has a house. Her house is flooded. Then she can stay in a hotel. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A hotel? Just until the repairs are done. "Daniel, she's 74. So she shouldn't be alone in a hotel for 2 weeks after her house was damaged." He rubbed his forehead. "This isn't about her age." "Then what is it about?" He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "It's about us." That sentence stopped me. Because for years, whenever Daniel wanted something, he used the word us. Us needed a bigger house. Us needed a new car. Us couldn't afford my mother visiting too often. Us needed to focus on our future. But somehow when my mother needed us suddenly meant Daniel and me. Not my family, not my mother, just him and me. I went upstairs. My mother was sitting on the edge of the guest bed. She looked at me and smiled. "You two had a disagreement." I sat beside her. "You heard?" "This house has thin walls." I apologized. She shook her head. "Don't." "Mom, don't apologize for someone else's behavior." Then she looked directly at me. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you." I waited. She took a deep breath. "Your husband has been calling me." My stomach dropped. "Calling you?" "Yes." "How long?" "About 6 months." I stared at her. "What does he call you about?" She hesitated. "Money." I felt my entire body go cold. "What money?" My mother looked away. "That's the problem." "What money, Mom?" She finally looked back at me. "Daniel asked me to lend him some." "How much?" $25,000. I stood up. "25,000? She nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he told me you knew." My heart started pounding. "He said I knew?" "Yes." "What exactly did he tell you?" "He said he needed the money to protect your marriage." I couldn't understand what she was saying. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know." "Did you give it to him?" "No." I turned around. "Why?" She smiled sadly. "Because he didn't ask like a son-in-law." "What do you mean?" "He asked like someone who was desperate." I sat down again. "What did he say?" My mother hesitated. Then she told me he needed the money to keep his business alive. He said one bad month could destroy everything. He said he was waiting for a major contract. He said once that contract came through, he would repay every dollar. Then she looked at me and said something that made my heart sink. He also told me that if I didn't help him, you might lose everything. I stared at her. "What does that mean?" "I don't know." "Did he ask again?" My mother looked down. 4 times. "And you refused every time?" "Yes." I couldn't sleep that night, because suddenly, my husband's question about my mother staying in our house didn't sound like a question anymore. It sounded like fear. The next morning, Daniel left early. He kissed my forehead before leaving. "Love you?" I said nothing. He didn't notice. After he left, I went into his home office. I had never searched through his things before. That morning, I didn't feel like a wife looking through her husband's belongings. I felt like someone trying to find out whether she still knew the person she had married. His desk was locked. That was unusual. Daniel had never locked it before. I searched for the key. It wasn't in the usual drawer. Then I remembered something. He kept a spare key in an old coffee tin in the garage. I found it. The drawer opened. Inside were bank statements, business documents, credit card notices, and something else. A folder with my name on it. I opened it. There were copies of our mortgage documents, our insurance policy, our investment account, and a loan application. My name was listed as a co-borrower. I froze. The loan amount was $180,000. The purpose was listed as business expansion. I had never signed it. I kept turning the pages. Then I saw my signature. It looked like mine, but it wasn't mine. Someone had copied it. My hands started shaking. I took pictures of every page. Then I heard the front door open. Daniel was home at 9:18 in the morning. He never came home that early. "Claire?" I quickly put everything back. "Upstairs." He walked into the office. His eyes immediately went to the drawer. He noticed it was open. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, "What were you looking for?" And I realized something. He wasn't surprised. He was afraid. That afternoon, my mother went to a nearby pharmacy. I stayed home. At 3:12 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A man's voice said, "Is this Claire Bennett?" "Yes." "My name is Robert Hayes. I'm calling from First National Financial." My heart started beating faster. "Okay." "I'm calling regarding a loan application connected to your husband." I didn't say anything. "We need to verify some information." "What information?" Did you personally authorize a $180,000 business loan? I closed my eyes. No. There was silence. Then he said, "That's what we suspected." Why? Because the signature doesn't match the identification documents we have on file. I gripped the phone. What happens now? I'm afraid I can't discuss the investigation over the phone. Is my house at risk? Another silence. Then he said, "Mrs. Bennett, I strongly recommend that you speak with an attorney before signing anything." The call ended. I stared at my phone. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Unknown number. I answered. This time, it was a woman. "Claire?" "Yes." "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Lisa. I'm calling about Daniel Bennett's business." I didn't recognize the name. "What about it?" "He owes my company money." "How much?" $47,000. I sat down. "What exactly did he purchase?" "Equipment." "For what?" "An office he said he was opening." "What office?" She gave me an address. I wrote it down. It wasn't our home. It wasn't Daniel's business address. It was a small commercial property 20 miles away. I asked her, "What does this have to do with me?" She hesitated. "Your husband told us the property belonged to your family." It didn't. I had never heard of it. And suddenly my mother's $25,000 made sense. Daniel wasn't trying to protect our marriage. He was trying to protect a secret. That evening, Daniel came home late. He acted normal, too normal. He asked about dinner. He asked about my mother's repairs. He watched television. He laughed at something on the news. Then he went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen. At 8:41 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again, then again. Within 20 minutes, there were 7 missed calls. I called the number back. A woman answered immediately. "Claire?" "Yes." "This is Margaret Lewis. I'm with the County Property Records Office." My heart stopped. "Why are you calling me?" "We found your name attached to a property transfer." "What property?" She gave me the same address Lisa had mentioned. I asked, "Did I sign anything?" "No." "Then why is my name there?" "That is exactly what we're trying to determine." She told me someone had submitted documents showing that I had agreed to become a guarantor on the property. I had not. Then she said, "There's one more thing." "What?" "The documents were notarized 6 months ago." 6 months, exactly when Daniel first asked my mother for money. I hung up. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice said, "Claire, you need to leave the house." I froze. "Who is this?" "Don't tell Daniel I called." "Who are you?" "I worked with him." "Where?" "At the company he told you he closed last year." I couldn't breathe. "What company?" "Bennett Consulting." "Daniel said it shut down." He lied. I heard my mother's bedroom door open upstairs. I whispered, "How many people has he borrowed money from?" The man paused. "Claire?" "I don't know." Then he said, "But you're not the only person whose name he used." The call ended. I looked at my phone. There were now 17 missed calls from unknown numbers. 17. And I suddenly understood why. Daniel hadn't made one mistake. He had created an entire web of them. At 10:06 that night, someone knocked on our front door. Daniel was upstairs. My mother was in the guest room. I walked downstairs. A woman stood outside. She looked exhausted. "Are you Claire?" "Yes." "My name is Jennifer." She handed me an envelope. "I used to work for your husband." I didn't open it. "What is this?" "Proof." "Proof of what?" "That he knew what he was doing." My hands trembled. She looked past me toward the stairs. "Does he know I'm here?" "No." "Good." She lowered her voice. "Claire, Daniel has been borrowing money using other people's names for almost a year." "Why?" "He kept saying he had a major contract coming." "Did he?" "No." "Then where did the money go?" Jennifer looked at me. Some of it went into his business. And the rest? She shook her head. I don't know. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of emails, bank transfers, messages. One message from Daniel read, "Once the property closes, Claire won't know anything happened until it's too late." I stopped breathing. The property? My property. Our home. I looked at Jennifer. What does he plan to do? She said, "He's trying to sell your house." Daniel came downstairs around midnight. He looked at me sitting at the kitchen table. "You're still awake?" "Yes," he smiled. "Everything okay?" I looked at him. 12 years of marriage passed through my mind. Our first apartment, our wedding, our vacations, the night we brought our first dog home, every birthday, every argument, every apology. And then I asked, "Daniel, what is our house worth?" His expression changed. "What? I'm just asking." "Why?" "Because I've been thinking about our finances." He pulled out a chair. "Claire, it's late. Did you try to sell our house?" He stopped, completely still. Then he said, "Who told you that?" I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally knew. "You didn't answer my question." He stood. "You've been going through my things. Did you forge my signature?" His face went pale. "Claire, did you?" He said nothing. "Did you use my name to borrow $180,000? It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He sat down. For the first time in 12 years, my husband looked old. "I was going to fix everything." "With what?" "The property." "What property?" He wouldn't answer. I pushed the documents toward him. "Who owns it?" He stared at the papers, then he whispered, "You wouldn't understand." And that was the moment I realized something. He wasn't trying to convince me he was innocent. He was trying to convince himself that what he had done was necessary. My mother came downstairs. She looked at Daniel, then at me. She said, "Tell her the truth." Daniel stood. "Evelyn, stay out of this." My mother didn't move. "You've been asking me for money for 6 months." Daniel looked at her. "I was desperate." "You were dishonest. You don't know what you're talking about." My mother smiled sadly. "I know more than you think." She walked to the kitchen cabinet. She opened a small drawer. Then she pulled out an envelope. She handed it to me. Inside was a copy of an email. It was from Daniel, 6 months earlier. He had written to my mother, "I need $25,000. If Claire finds out about the debt, she'll leave me." I looked at him. "Is this true?" He didn't answer. My mother continued, "He told me if I didn't help him, you'd lose everything." I looked at Daniel. "You threatened my mother?" "No." "You told her I'd lose everything." I was scared. "Of what?" He finally said, "Failure." And somehow that one word explained everything. Daniel hadn't started lying because he hated me. He had started lying because he was terrified of failing. But fear doesn't make betrayal less painful. It only explains it. The next morning I called an attorney. Her name was Susan Miller. I showed her everything: the forged signature, the loan, the property documents, the messages, the unknown calls. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked one question. "Do you have access to your credit reports?" "Yes." "Check them." I did. There were accounts I didn't recognize, 3 credit inquiries, 2 business-related accounts, and a line of credit opened under my name. I felt sick. Susan looked at the screen. "Claire, this is serious." "What should I do?" "Do not confront him again." "Why?" "Because you don't know what else he has done." She helped me freeze my credit. Then she contacted the bank, then the property office, then an investigator. By afternoon, we had discovered something even worse. Daniel had been preparing to transfer ownership of our house into a company he controlled. If he succeeded, selling the house could have become extremely complicated. He had already scheduled a meeting with a notary for the following Monday. Today was Friday, 3 days. That's how close I had been to losing the home my mother had helped me buy. That night, I asked my mother something I'd been afraid to ask. "Mom, Why did you really come? She looked at me. The house being damaged was real. I know. But that's not the only reason. I waited. She sighed. Your husband called me 3 weeks ago. What did he say? He told me you were thinking about leaving him. I stared at her. I wasn't. I know. What else? He asked me to convince you to stay. Why? Because he said if you left, he would lose everything. I felt a chill. My mother reached for my hand. He wanted me to protect him. And you refused. I told him I would protect my daughter. I started crying. She hugged me. Then she whispered, I didn't come here to cause trouble, Claire. I know. I came because I was afraid. Of Daniel? She nodded. And suddenly, I understood. My mother hadn't come to our house because she needed somewhere to sleep. She had come because, for the first time in her life, she didn't know where else to turn. Monday morning came quickly. Daniel left the house wearing a suit. He kissed my cheek. I'll be back around lunch. I smiled. Okay. He didn't know the attorney was waiting 2 streets away. He didn't know the bank had frozen the suspicious accounts. He didn't know the property transfer had been blocked. And he didn't know the 17 calls I had received had created a trail he could no longer erase. At 11:32 that morning, my attorney called. Claire, he's at the property office. What should I do? Stay home. At 11:48, another call came. He's asking why the transfer was blocked. At 12:04, he's calling the bank. At 12:19, he's calling you. I looked at my phone. Daniel was calling. I didn't answer. He called again, then again, then again. I remembered the message I'd seen earlier. Once the property closes, Claire won't know anything happened until it's too late. But now he was the one who didn't know what was happening. At 12:37, my phone rang again. This time I answered. Claire! His voice sounded desperate. What happened? You know what happened. Listen to me. No. Please. I had never heard Daniel say that word like that. Please. Then he said something unexpected. I didn't mean to hurt you. I closed my eyes. Daniel, you didn't hurt me because you made a mistake. Silence. You hurt me because you made a plan. The investigation continued for weeks. We discovered Daniel had accumulated nearly $300,000 in debt. Some was legitimate business debt. Some came from failed investments. Some came from loans he had taken using other people's information. And some money had simply disappeared. He eventually admitted everything. He said he believed he could recover financially. He said he was going to repay everyone. He said he planned to sell the property and start over. But every explanation eventually returned to the same sentence. I thought I could fix it. Maybe he did. Maybe he believed that. But every time the problem grew, he made another decision, another lie, another signature, another secret. Until finally he wasn't fixing anything. He was building a wall around himself, and I was standing on the other side of it. Our marriage ended, not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to destroy him. It ended because I finally understood that trust isn't something you can repair with an apology when the other person has spent months deliberately breaking it. My mother eventually returned home. Her house was repaired. The basement smelled like fresh paint. The furnace worked again, and on the first night she slept there, she called me. I'm home, I smiled. I know. You coming to visit this weekend? Absolutely. Then she said, Claire? Yes? Are you okay? I looked around my quiet house. For the first time in months, there was no tension, no secrets, no locked drawers, no unexplained phone calls. I answered honestly, I think I'm going to be. Months later, I was cleaning out an old drawer when I found a screenshot of those 17 missed calls. I stared at the number. 17 calls. At the time, I thought they were 17 problems. Now I saw them differently. They were 17 warnings. 17 people trying to tell me something I didn't want to believe. Sometimes we imagine that betrayal arrives dramatically. A confession, a suitcase by the door, a screaming argument. But sometimes betrayal is quieter. It's a locked drawer, a strange bank statement, a question your mother refuses to answer, a husband who suddenly doesn't want your family around, a phone that keeps ringing from numbers you don't recognize, and sometimes the question that saves you is the simplest one. Why? Why did he ask my mother for money? Why was my signature on a document I never signed? Why was he trying to transfer our house? Why did 17 different people need to call me? And most importantly, why had I ignored the small signs for so long? I don't know if I'll ever have a perfect answer to that last question. Maybe I was protecting my marriage. Maybe I was protecting the man I thought Daniel was. Maybe I was afraid that if I asked the wrong question, I'd discover an answer I couldn't live with. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the truth hurts less than living inside a lie, because once you know the truth, you can make a decision. You can leave. You can rebuild. You can protect yourself. And you can finally breathe. My mother once told me, "Watch how a person treats you when nobody is watching." I understand those words now, because the most important part of someone's character isn't how they behave when everyone is looking. It's what they do when they believe they can get away with it. Daniel thought I would never find out. He thought the documents would stay hidden. He thought my mother would stay silent. He thought the 17 people calling me were separate problems he could manage. He was wrong. They were all pieces of the same story, and eventually, every piece came together. Today, my mother and I talk almost every evening. Sometimes we talk for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour, sometimes neither of us has anything important to say, but I never take those calls for granted anymore. Because 1 year ago, I thought my biggest problem was a broken pipe in my mother's basement. I was wrong. The broken pipe wasn't what changed my life. The 17 phone calls did. And even now, whenever my phone rings from an unknown number, I don't automatically ignore it. I stop. I look at the screen, and I ask myself one question. What if this is the call I was supposed to answer? Because sometimes the call you don't want to receive is the one that finally tells you the truth. And sometimes the truth isn't the ending. It's the beginning.